having the water. And I'm out of water. We need water.
What's your name? Just grab some out of the car.
Is there any water? Here.
I'm good.
You're good?
I started going live, but hopefully it doesn't take forever to come out here.
I'm gonna give you this, so when you get tired, just snap the phone in there like that.
It's super good, man. Let's see here, bro. I appreciate that. I give you the hold back. Can you actually hold it from here? And then let's slide it in. Thank you, brother. Is it gonna fit? Thank you, brother.
Check.
You all good?
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, if we could get your attention, we do want to start Kola Yuha Ichichiabu. My name is Chase Iron Eyes. I'm an attorney, a father. I work for President Julian Bearrunner of the Oglala Lakota Nation. The mighty Oglala Lakota Nation, right? We are few, but we are mighty. That is for sure. Before we begin, we do want to ask one of our elders to Wocheke Kaga to offer an invocation to the powers of creation on our behalf. So we are ready to start, and I want to thank everybody for coming here tonight on such short notice. You guys have turned up in amazing energy and have shown your love not only to Greta, but the movement. The source and the force of the movement lives because you're willing to show up. We're all willing to show up, but I want to invite Basil to offer us invocation, please. Basil Braveheart, you may be one of the oldest Oglalas with us, but if you could offer us a prayer.
Advocacy, Mitaki, let's that to be. Wopelai Chichapelo. Chanteo Ichika Machapelo. La coach has been Michapi Matowaki. I extend a warm handshake to all of you who have come here for a very extremely sacred network that we need to create around our Mother Earth. Now, ask my grandson, Emery Braveheart, to help me with this prayer. In our Lakota way, we honor the original ingredients of how this universe began. It is with sound and light. That's why they have a very sacred relationship with the Thunberg. So I'm going to ask him to sing this sacred song, and while he's singing that, I'm going to pray for direction, for blessing, and that this vision is Daku Wakan strong. Something in sacred motion continues to move throughout the world.
Oh!
tukasha. Leo petukia. Petu on wakana kukule. Urohtaa takia. Wakupakuzo wajateki. Milia wajateki. Letsetkä. Lehtätuki. Letsetkä hittuun uusilla tapo. Me onkia takia. Uusilla tapo tukasha. Letsellä hän ilää. Mä johtaa tukasha. Uusilla. Kun mä ajattelin kyllä liikkeessä, nyt liikkeellä kannalla. Meillä kannalla kannalla. En tätäkin heillä kannalla, mä kanssa kankin yhdellä kannalla. Kun kasvaa onkia tuolla lempetykin, ajattelin, että tää hiukille, ja joksekille taakakille, niin täkyy millään musta isä, niin täkyy sitä ykköllä. Uusia tapoja, opera, ja psykeotukassa, onkia kova. Hei!
Thank you for that, Basil. Basil has also been involved in a lot of work to begin a truth-telling. You know, before there can be a reconciliation, there needs to be a conciliation. But before that can happen, there needs to be a truth-telling. Basil has done this work over the course of years in renaming Harney Peak to Blackout Peak. That's right. That's history. And I wanted to recognize Basil for that publicly. Because they're also working on getting the medals rescinded for Wounded Knee that were given there for that conduct. Thank you for that, Basil. And it's sorry it took so long for me to get over to see you there along the road there towards Calico. Finally stopped in. I'm a transplant here too, Oglala Makoche. I've been here for a little over a year, and when I got here, I had the opportunity. I tried to lay low for a while. I tried to. For a couple months, I just stayed inside the houses at IHS, which is kind of like the Bel Air of Pine Ridge. It's like the gated community of the res. I stayed in there, and I ran on my treadmill, and I watched everything I could watch about Pine Ridge on YouTube. So I could learn about who I was. Because my father is from Pine Ridge. And when I moved here, I went to Big Bats. Everybody knows Big Bats is an icon. Big Bats is like an icon living. I'm there, I come out of there, I look across the street, and I see a guy that I know. I haven't seen him in a while. And I met him at the front lines of the No Dapper movement. I met him when we stood with Standing Rock. And when we offered ourselves there at Ocheti Shakowin and Ocheti Oyate, we inspired a global uplift in consciousness that is reverberating always. And I saw this brother across the street, and I recognized him. I said, "Hey, Crowbar is what we knew him as at camp." I said, "Crowbar," and I ran across the street, and I hugged him, and he said, "You know what? I just turned in my petition to run for the presidency of the Oglala Sioux tribe." And I was like, "What?" All right, well, I like the sounds of that. I just ran for the United States Congress. I lost, but, let me help your Facebook page. And he said, "Well, the campaign is pretty much me and you now. And he had done the work by himself to build his campaign. And I came in at a time when I was able to offer a lending hand. And Julian Bearrunner is now the president of the mighty Oglala Lakota Nation. This is a guy who big extraction tried to criminalize, tried to discredit him, tried to say that he's trespassing on his own land. And a lot of people, I get a lot of the credit and the blame for that Last Child's Camp, that effort there. But the world should know that the drive and the impetus started with now President Julian Bearrunner, and also another serving official of the Oglala Lakota people, Ricky Graygrass is the serving 5th member. And there are other members of our Oglala Tribal Council here. I saw Nikita Mills, and I also saw Jen Spotted Bear. If I missed anybody, you just have to forgive me. This all came together in very, very, very short order. So again, thank you, but I want to welcome and ask President Bearrunner to come up and just, give a welcome and spend however much time you want, really. We'll give you the signal if we need time. But if you come up here, President, yeah, let's give him a hand. There's not a lot of chiefs in Washington. There's not a lot of leaders that are unbribable, that will go hard for the people and for Mother Earth. But this is one of them. Wopila.
Almadakiapi. Julian Bearrunner Manchapi Alona, Chante Washri, Nape Chuzapelo. I want to thank you, Chase, for that introduction. And I want to first acknowledge our youth that have come out for this event. Our elders, one of my fellow Rockasons, Grandpa Basil Braveheart over here. I served in one of the same units that he served in during the Korean War. And I was able to catch up with him prior, to the kickoff of this event, and to share some words of encouragement. And I also want to acknowledge our Madam Secretary of the tribe, Jennifer Spotted Bear, Council Representative, our delegate, Ms. Nikita Mills, and I thank them for being here, on behalf of the tribe, but to every one of you as a tribal members, to come out to show support is something that we believe in. Our foundation in protecting our natural resources and our way of life. But I also want to thank Mahpea Luka Owayawa and the Red Cloud School for opening the doors and allowing us to come in here to gather and to put our hearts and our minds together in an effort to sustain what we have left for the generations yet to come. Meaning our water, our land, our air, everything that our ancestors fought and died for, so that we can have those luxuries today. To turn on the water, able to drink from the faucet, able to walk on this land and freely. So I also want to acknowledge our ancestors, for that sacrifice that they made, so that we can be here today. Just to touch on a little bit about Chase, when we met, that was over in Standing Rock, and he came and he asked, he said, can you guys help? We're trying to keep going, and so I did reach out to our 5th member, who is one of our spiritual leaders here on the reservation, Mr. Graygrass, and I asked him for some spiritual guidance, and he came up and he prayed with the fire, he prayed with us, and we all did a chunupa, and we did it the best way that we know how, and the best way that we were taught. And Chase touched a little bit about how I came to be the president of the Oglala Sioux tribe. I did that in prayer. I didn't pray and ask the Creator to make me the president. But what I did was I prayed and I looked around and I told the Creator, I had a good conversation and said, this is what I see is wrong. This is what I see is happening. And this is what I would do if I was in that position. You know, and then today, I'm standing here greeting you guys as the president of our tribe. You know, as the second youngest ever in our history. And it hasn't been easy. You know, it hasn't been easy at all because, you know, this is the first time I've heard anybody refer to us as the mighty Oglala. I always hear we're the hostile. You know, we're the wild Oglalas. That's the definition that I hear, you know, that describes us. So, you know, it's really hard, you know, but trying as the president to escalate us as a tribe, to put us at the table with the big players, to put us at the table with the government, to show that we are a sovereign nation, that we are a force to be reckoned with. That you know, we're not going to lay low, we're not going to allow corporate greed, or we're not going to allow them to come and take from our land. And to strongly represent each and every one of you that believe in that. You know, because there's a lot of times when we're not taking, you know, our input is not asked for. And if they do allow us that time to speak, it's like it falls on deaf ears. It goes in one ear and out the other. They still do what they want to do. You know, but whenever I go to Washington or whenever I go, you know, to all these meetings that I've been attending, is to let them know that I have all of you. All of you are going to be on the front lines. All of you are going to stand there to demand the return of the Black Hills, to return the full authority of this land to us. And I don't just mean the reservation. I mean the 1851 and the 1868 treaty territory. Because that's who we were in the beginning, and that's who we're going to be in the end. And as long as we have our elders to stand here to tell us and remind us of who we are and where we come from, that's always going to be our stance. And now that we see that, you know, the extraction of oil and gold and uranium, and you know, we're taking the Western education and we're looking at the science and we're understanding the impacts, the negative impacts that it's having on us as a tribe and as a people. So we're using their education against them. You know, and that's why, you know, when we encourage you to get your education, is to know that you use that education in a good way. That when you come home, you don't use that education against your own people. You use that education against the government. You know, the people that brought that education here. Because they tried to manipulate our minds to get what they want. But now that they have shown us their education and they've given that to us, and they demanded that we become educated in their way, you know, now it's our time to stand there with their education and say, what you're doing is wrong. And what you're doing is going to speed up the process to our very extinction. And as Native peoples, as the Oglala Oyate, we are not going to tolerate that because we also have our own education and belief system that help us to see that. And that we're going to, that same blood that ran through Crazy Horse's veins is still alive because it runs through your veins. So whenever we see those tractors or those, you know, those man camps or, you know, those oil pipelines start to encroach on our land, I don't know about, I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys can do the same thing, but I'm going to make sure that I'm standing on that front line and they're going to have to run over me. That I'm going to lay my life down so that that doesn't happen. Just the same way that Grandpa and Grandma, you know, that Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull and all our great chiefs did for us. You know, Crazy Horse said, Hoka hey. You know, it's a good day to die because he knew that if he gave his life fighting hard and eliminating the threat to his people, that his people were still going to survive. So, you know, I have to repay them and do that same thing as a leader. I have to lay my life down because like that little guy sitting right there, you know, this little baby here in this chair, you know, they're going to depend on what we're using today. They're going to depend on this land. They're going to depend on our natural resources. And, so that's my mentality. And that's what I've been giving to Congress and to Washington, D.C., all while trying to define us as a people in a good way, in an honorable way, to let them know that we exist, we're not going to tolerate this. And, I have generations yet to come. And, they as a leader, they acknowledge that. So I also let them know the same thing, that you're going to have to kill me. You're going to see a leader spill blood for his people in the way that my ancestors did, to defend what's right for them, for the newborn and the unborn. So, I don't want to take up too much time. I just wanted to take some time to express, what I've been working on as the tribal president, the things that I've been engaging in, what my heart, my mind tell me, and and some people, it's crazy, because when I go to Washington or I get up and I have to speak, a lot of times they say, who preps your speeches? I was like, I just get up and talk from the heart, and let the Creator, lead me from there. I don't have nobody that types things up and makes me really talking points. I'm not good at that. I'll put that aside and I'll just tell them how it is, tell them how I was taught. And so, I want to share a little bit about where I've been, where I come from, and what brings me here today. But without further ado, I do want to acknowledge and welcome each and every one of you, and also to welcome and to thank one of our own, Ms. Tokatawin and Greta Thunberg, to connect our hearts and our minds with our young people, to make sure my ears are open, because our young people are still sacred, they're still pure. They see things through a clear set of eyes. So I always try to make it a priority to listen to them, because then it triggers something. We connect, and as a leader, it's also my obligation to be their voice, to move things forward that they want to see. So, aquí wopi wa tampa uchicha. Ola chuchu me dafu yo mola.
Thank you for that. Yeah, you can see how we're inspired. I will follow Julian anywhere. And the entire Sioux Nation will follow us anywhere. We have to be willing to stand in the strength and the conviction of our peace. We cannot back down. Being peaceful doesn't mean backing down. Being peaceful means that we stand. We don't have a choice, we have to stand. If there's anybody that's authorized in violence, it's us. If there's anybody, it's us. But yet we choose forgiveness. We choose compassion. Because we know that there is strength in that movement. We've committed ourselves to that. But the system as it is violent. It is perpetrating violence against us. Against Mother Earth, against women, against immigrants, against black lives, against indigenous sovereignty, and so forth. So we have a role to play. People are waking up and we have a role to play. Part of that role is asserting ourselves. There's two sisters in here who have done that, and one of them, her name is Red Dawn Foster. And I want to introduce Red Dawn. I didn't know if you were walking, Red Dawn. It's really good to see you walking and healing. She is a state senator from District 27, which includes Oglala, Cook County, Jackson County, and Bennett County. The most recent illegal annexations. But anyhow, She is amazing, and I'm glad to be just sharing space and energy with her. This is Red Dawn Foster.
Thank you everybody for coming here. Thank you Chase, and thank you President Bear Runner for everything that you do for our people. And thank you to Kata for your strength and wisdom, and thank you for bringing our special guest, Greta Thunberg. The wisdom and the power and the strength of these two young women remind us that any solution to this climate crisis must include youth and Indigenous peoples.
Yep.
As Indigenous peoples, we are born into a legacy of struggle and resistance. We have a deep connection to the earth. We were gifted the responsibility to take care of this land, our homelands. So I would like to welcome Greta Thunberg to our homelands. These are the lands that our people have grown time immemorial. Our ancestors are buried here. Our children are learning the language, revitalizing the language. We're doing food sovereignty. We're connected to this earth, and we want to welcome you. And Tokatawin, you are now our relative. And so as you go on to this journey, know that the Ogallala Lakota stand beside you in all this important work. Thank you.
Before we did this, we didn't know there was going to be this many people, so we gave everybody an agenda with all these stage times and call times, and not a single person showed up for any of them. I'm just playing, you don't do that in Indian country. So, that was Red. I don't know if Puri is here. Is Puri in the house? Red Dawn and Puri ran amazing campaigns in District 27 in the last election, and we look forward to increasing voter turnout and just making sure that we're represented on all of those arenas. I want to invite Tashina Banks. We have no set order, so Nick Tilson, you're on deck, but Tashina, if you would come up now. We're really extremely thankful to Mafia Luta Owaiowa, to the Red Cloud School. We got 5 kids here. My wife is Dr. Sarah Jumping Eagle. She's a mighty Oglala. She's the reason I'm kind of the way I am. She brought us here. She brought us to Pine Ridge. She brought us home. So I want to let Tashina, you can introduce yourself and say some remarks.
Thank you, Chase. Mikafiyapi, Tashina, Amachiyapi, Ishto, Oglala, Amataha, Na Leha, Pine Ridge, Elwatiye. Inawaye, Kamuk, Nichols, Echiapi, Na Atewaye, Dennis Banks, Echiapi. Chantewa, Shtea, Nape, Chiuzapi, Shto. Hello, I'm Tashina Banks Rema. Our president asked me to just say a few welcoming words to our beautiful young guest, and none of you guys can see her, but those of us standing over here can see her. Greta Thunberg. I actually have a few, I think Red Dawn and Chase and President Bear Runner said a lot of wonderful words, and I don't think I can add anything more special to that except welcome to Red Cloud, Mapia Vita Owaiowa. I do have a couple of gifts, and one I would like our student who made a ribbon skirt. So I'm wearing a ribbon skirt, and one of our students stayed up all night and today finished a ribbon skirt for you. And so I would like Esperanza, the 8th grader. So Esperanza, I'm going to let Esperanza introduce herself, and then Greta, if you would come out here and accept this ribbon skirt.
Dr. Esperanza Marcia.
Inawayaki Tashina Rema na Atewayaki na Rema Echa. Uchiwayaki Lindy Mendoza na Judy Rema Elby Chakyaku. Kakawayaki David Rema na Eladio Mendoza Wichakwa. Chantera na Kofi Rakishke. My name is Esperanza Rema. I live here and I live in this My name is Esperanza. I live here. I make ribbon skirts and I'm really happy to give this to Greta.
Thank you, Esperanza. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you for that. I would like to invite Nick Tilson, a brother who served as the executive director of Thunder Valley for many years. And now he's founded and is leading an organization called Indian Impact, which, he's got some announcements to make. We've got some announcements to make at the end of tonight about tomorrow. Called up Nick and asked for his assistance. And Nick Tilson's Ogawa Lakota, and he's a mover. He's a guy who has been getting things done. You saw the splash that Thunder Valley continues to make. And now in his new ventures, we appreciate your work. So if you come out, I would like to give you the microphone, brother, so you can say a few words and welcome.
Amadakyapi, Nick Tilson, Amachapi, Sante Washington, Petuzapolo. My name is Nick Tilson. I'm a father of four. I have children in elementary, junior high, and high school here at Red Cloud. So let's give it up for Red Cloud. We're all here because the earth is crying for our help. We're here because we heard the voice of young people, and that's why we're here. And it just so happens to be that what we as Oglala, Lakota people, for whatever happened to us throughout history, we have this pride in us. We have this no fear in us that was put in each and every one of us to not hold back. And it was a handful of years ago that they shared with us in a ceremony, and I shared these words with you now. And they said, how long are you going to let other people decide the future for your children? Are you not warriors? It's time to stop talking, start doing. I share those words with you because those words led to the creation of the work that you see happening at Thunder Valley, which is trying to build a better future for our people, create a vision for our people of how we want to live. Leading up to Standing Rock, I remember listening to Like She Orville Looking Horse, and he said something when we were in prayer. And he said, as long as there is a need for blood in this black snake, then there's always going to be a black snake. And if you think about that for a minute, what he was actually saying was that as long as we have a dependency on oil, then there's always going to be another pipeline to fight. And we're going to keep battling over and over and over. And so we need to be thinking about what kind of future we want to live. What do we want our future to live? And Thunder Valley is just a small example of what happens when you put your heart and your mind together and make something better for the people. Tokatawin, Greta are representing the voice of what young people are saying all around the world. If you hear, they'll tell you, we're not the first young people to say this. These people are saying this all around the world. And I guess to some of the young people here on Pine Ridge, sometimes we hold back. We are afraid to stand up and say something because we're afraid to say, oh, somebody's going to think I'm trying to be somebody. This is an example, my relatives, this is an example of when you take that courage, you don't hold back at all, and you bring a message to the world. And the fact that the whole entire world is listening to a handful of teenagers is powerful. There's a saying of, well, what do we do then? What do we do in these times that we're in? And there's a saying that says, and it's part of the Sustainable Development Principles, of that we have to meet the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And the future generation is telling us we aren't doing a good job, except for Indigenous people. The issue here at hand is biodiversity, that we need to have biodiversity in the world to stop climate change. It just so happens to be that 80% of the world's biodiversity that is left in the world is left in the hands of Indigenous people. So that tells you something. In every Indigenous language in the world, there is a word that says all things are connected. I've yet to hear an Indigenous language, and I got the opportunity to hear hundreds of them. In Lakota, we say Mekakuyase. In every other Indigenous language in the world, you will also hear that. And it's because we understand the interconnectedness of things. And this is an opportunity for us to come together and make a change for the world. So I just want to thank the young people, and to thank Greta, to thank Tokatawin. The movement in Standing Rock was started by young people rising up. And it wasn't just the young people. It wasn't the young people just giving us hope. It was the young people leading our movement and leading us into the future, just like they are here today.
Thank you for that, Nick. It's, Thunder Valley has done great work, and I know that it took a long time, because I've been trying for 10 years to do something. And when the cameras aren't there, work's got to get done, and Nick is the guy that gets the work done. So in terms of nation building, in terms of Indigenous sovereignty, and what that means for us now in the 21st century, what does that mean for us now in terms of building bridges and relationships with anybody and everybody around the world. The world is changing fast. And so it's just my honor and my privilege and also it's a burden. It's a responsibility. And Greta is playing a very important role, and so is Tokata. And they carry a lot of gravity, a lot of weight. They're carrying our burdens. And all of the young people are doing that same thing, but we just want to know, we want them to know that they have our love, that they've got our compassion, everybody here. And that's, and even afterwards, Greta has to bounce out here real quick, so we can't flood her for selfies and stuff. I just want to throw that out there right now, because we want to treat her like our daughter and our little sister, our relative. You know what I mean? And she's getting bombarded. She's carrying a lot of weight, and she needs our love and support. And that's what we're here to do, is to offer that. So Tokata and Greta, if you could start making your way over here. We're about to start. Greta Thunberg. guest gets to sit in the amazing quilted seat. And thank you all again for just sharing an evening with us at such short notice on Sunday. Thank you to the people that cooked the food. It's so just good energy. And at first, I'd like you to just introduce yourselves, each of you, and then I'll hit you with a couple questions, or we'll just talk. You know.
Hello everyone, my name is Tokatawin. I'm the daughter of Chase and Sarah. I'm also a high school junior here at Red Cloud. I come from the Standing Rock Reservation in North Dakota, and my family and I recently moved here about a year ago to the Pine Ridge Reservation. And so that transition has been a very necessary one, I think, for me in terms of broadening what Indigenous looks like to me and what Native activism looks like for me, because Pine Ridge is a place with a really rich history in Native resistance. And so for me, it's been a really long and awesome learning experience to be here with all of you. But yeah, that's me. I started public speaking when I was 9 years old. My first time was my mother took me to a board meeting for mining for uranium in the Black Hills. And she told me that if I wanted to speak, I could. And so I did, and I have no recollection of what I said, but it had something to do with, I don't want my water to be yellow. You know, at any age, we can see that these things are wrong, and we have the right to protect those things. Simple things that every human being should have a right to. I was also a part of the very first video campaign, our call to action at Standing Rock, and that was when I was 12. Did I just say that? Anyway. Yes, so this type of activism, the stuff that me and Greta have been doing for a while, this is all accessible to every single person sitting in this room, and we need your voice in order to come up with a solution. So thank you for being here today.
Hi, my name is Greta Thunberg. I am a Swedish climate activist, and I just want to say I am so honored to be here in your homelands and to visit you, and everyone has been so nice and so welcoming, and I am so thankful for that. And also, I'm so grateful for the wonderful gifts I have received. And about me. I'm a climate activist. About a bit over 1 year ago, I started to school strike for the climate outside the Swedish Parliament, where I live. And yeah, since then, every Friday I have been striking from school or protesting wherever I am. And yeah, there is a movement called Fridays for Future, which I'm a part of.
Is that microphone worse, or do I just speak louder and right into the thing? You guys just hold it a little closer. Wow, it's beyond words, really. It's indescribable. It's synchronistic. It's kismet. It's destiny. It's all of those things. We never could have imagined that Greta and Tokata, that those worlds would come together in such a way. We never could have imagined that. We're constantly thinking of how we can best advocate. and we never could have foreseen this. But I would like you guys to talk about how you met. If you could talk about how you met, and just, you know, the people would like to know that.
So since Standing Rock, and I'm sure a lot of you already know about what happened, and if you don't, you should read up on it. So since Standing Rock and since my activism there, I've been doing a lot of work around Indigenous environmental rights and missing and murdered Indigenous women. And trying to bridge this sort of divide between what we know as Indigenous activism and recognizing our Mother Earth as a being and something that is autonomous from us and that has been here longer than us. So when I go and speak, I've been traveling a lot and I do miss a lot of school, and I apologize, but also I don't. So I was in DC actually about 2.5 weeks ago, and I ended up speaking at one of the same events as Greta, and that was kind of where we met, in the seats of an audience at the same event. And I remember she told me that I was a hero right before I went on stage, and then immediately afterwards I started crying. And right as I came down, I remember thinking, gosh, humbled me a little bit, because I was like, oh my gosh, that's like the best I've ever spoken, and then right immediately afterwards I fell down the stairs off the stage. So, yes, I'm not sure if you witnessed that, but that did happen. But yeah, and I think just being able to relate to another 16-year-old, like we're the same age and we're fighting for the same things. And so to find somebody else in this world where I'm walking down a path that kind of seems that I'm on my own road a lot of the time. A lot of the kids at my school and a lot of the kids that are in my age group just aren't doing the same things that I am. And so to meet somebody else who is equally as interested and equally as courageous was very important to me, and it's very awesome, and I'm so glad that you get to be here today.
Yeah, we met at that event, and I remember I was very captured by your speech because it was incredibly captivating. And then we did some other things together some days after that in the Congress and the Senate, and it's just so good to meet someone the same age who share the commitment, who share the same commitment, because we were born in so different parts of the world, and in many ways we are so different, but also in many ways we are so much alike. We share both the commitment to saving the planet.
Yes.
And so yeah, I just look up to you a lot because I see that I can feel that you are very courageous, and I feel you're a true person, and some people are indeed very true and they are very valuable, so yeah.
Thank you. The same thing. I know that there's a lot of criticism because, you know, the system is set up in a way so that a lot of times people who are fighting for the same thing find themselves dividing amongst each other. And so when I think that's why events and conversations like this are so important, because we have to realize that we're all on the same team and we're all fighting for the same thing. So no matter who is in the spotlight, no matter who is getting the most camera time, we have to be able to come together as one under the same set of values and be able to speak to each other on this level of human being and talking about the same things and how we can make real change together without any forms of jealousy and addressing conflict before it becomes something that is out of our hands. And as children, 16-year-olds, I think we found a way to do that, which shows, I think, the people in this room and the people outside of it and all across the country that there is no need for conflict about this anymore. I also would like to say I look up to you just as much. And in DC, we shared a very intensive week together. We were lobbying in Congress most of the time, so it was back-to-back meetings with state representatives. And this can become very draining very fast, because I don't know if you've ever spoken with a politician, but it is a process. Yes, and you know, as an Indigenous person and as somebody who's grown up on Standing Rock on a reservation, and having to come back to this struggle after going to these metropolises like DC, it's a very personal and grudging thing. And so for me, having to bear that part of myself to these people who I need to listen, because they are in power and they are in leadership positions right now. That is a process, and trying to get them to understand how personal and how great of a crisis this is a very long process, and we shared that together. Yeah.
Thank you. Amazing. How it is strange that they are 16. These are 16-year-olds. I don't remember what I wasn't doing this when I was 16. I was not. This just was not. I didn't have all the marbles together, and the gerbil wasn't running up there like it is now. And that's because of a very real threat. That's because there are people, human beings, who are causing the climate crisis. We should start there. That's a base precept. There's no argument about is climate change human caused or what's happening. We are causing it. We are behaving like a virus, really. And I wanted to ask you guys what is your message, or what do you say to sometimes media, I hear them ask questions like, you're so passionate. You're such a climate activist. What do you feel about that term? What does that mean? And how do you feel we can pass that fire around to people?
Yeah, I mean, I get asked a lot of times, like over and over, why are you so passionate about this? And why are you finding this so interesting? And I mean, I'm not doing this because it's like a special interest, or because it's more interesting than other subjects. It's because this is an actual crisis, and people are being threatened. People are being killed by it today, and it's not just something we can look away from anymore. And I mean, instead of asking that, why aren't you so passionate about this? Why aren't you finding this so interesting? And why aren't you spending all your waking hours trying to fight for a livable future for everyone? And I just think I don't think people are evil. I just think people are just very unaware of the urgency of this crisis and of the magnitude of this crisis. And I think a first step is to try to inform people what is actually going on, and who are these people who are being impacted by it today, and what is there we can do about it, and to just come together despite their differences, and to come together in this fight, in this common fight.
I think that the term climate activist is something that's almost an oxymoron now. A climate activist should be a normal person at the stage that we're at in this crisis. Yes, we should all be working as hard as Greta. We should all be organizing as much as me. Let me tell you, I've been stressed about this event all week, and I'm so happy that you guys are here, but it's a lot of work. And I would imagine that if we were all putting in work, it wouldn't be so stressful. I think for me, something that is always really odd is just thinking about how easy solutions could be. And thinking about the barriers that are almost always imaginary that we put up for each other that are keeping us from reaching true solutions. We know what we need as individuals, and we know what makes us happy, what makes us healthy. And the fact that we can recognize that and deny that to the people around us by being complacent is really a strange phenomenon. And so to the people sitting in this audience and to whoever is watching online anywhere, we have a moral responsibility to do something about this. It is not about who gets the label of climate activist, who gets the label of doing more. It is about who am I to deny my responsibility to my children and their children? Who am I to deny my responsibility to the human of this planet? The phrase in Lakota, Midakuye Onyasi, means we are all connected, we are all related. This is, and a lot of people may not translate it this way, but it truly means that we are connected to everything. So when we're talking about the planet, we're talking about the waters, the rocks. We are talking about us. We're talking about the things that build us up and make us able to even have this conversation right now. The things that we're fighting for are not something abstract or not something far away from us. These are things that truly directly affect us and who we are as human beings. As 16-year-olds, right, we can already see the effects that the climate crisis has. We have been denied a childhood because who, as a 16-year-old, spends their waking hours thinking about how detrimental this crisis is? Who spends their hours debating whether or not to go and lobby in Congress instead of going to school? These are things that should not exist, and they do.
That's it.
And as we watch and witness the young people continuously acting more than the adults in power, it should be a good enough sign for the mass population to witness that something is wrong with the way that things are going right now.
You know, Greta, how did you get to our homelands here? You know, which is now called the United States. We signed treaties with the United States. But you ended up here on our shores. Can you explain how you got here and what you were doing there and where you're going?
Yeah, I arrived here in the end of August, and I arrived here by sailboat.
Oh.
And yeah, it is. And I did that because I had stopped flying because of climate reasons, and I just thought that I'm one of the very few people in the world who can actually do this trip. So therefore, I mean, why not? Plus, it was fun as well. But and now I've been here for a few weeks, quite a lot of weeks, and it's been amazing in so many ways. And now I'm traveling through the continent and then on to slowly start making it to Santiago de Chile for the COP25, if I make it there.
And wow. So you were on a sailboat for about 2 weeks. She was on a sailboat for 2 weeks. I come from where the buffalo live, and I couldn't even imagine it. You know, when we start with the premise that we're in a climate crisis, when we admit that to ourselves, and then we add to that the fact that 850 people were arrested, were criminalized at Standing Rock, at Nodapo, at Bochete. 800, Tokata had to watch her mom get arrested. A pediatrician who went to Stanford Medical, she had to watch her mother get arrested. She had to watch her father face a potential 6 years in prison. Because these forces, I don't know if we should call them an enemy. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that could be a question. There are forces at work trying to destroy our water, trying to criminalize those who are standing up for Mother Earth, those who want clean water for their children and all living beings. In this state, the governor put into play this riot-boosting law that was recently shot down. They plan to build the Keystone XL pipeline in January. And could you guys talk a little bit about what's going down in Rapid City tomorrow that nobody knows about? So just offer some words on that, and how do we smile through this?
So there is going to be an action tomorrow in Rapid City to protest the Keystone XL and to bring awareness to the climate crisis. As people who live in the Midwest, I think that we can all pretty much agree that there's not a ton of awareness and a ton of communication about how detrimental this time right now is in regards to the climate crisis. And so to be the people who are in the streets and talking about it is going to be something that's going to be really powerful. And so we right now are looking towards the indigenous people of this land, because we are the ones who carry the blueprints for the solutions that everyone is looking for. If you are not including indigenous people in conversations and actions about solutions, the solutions that you create are not sustainable. Because as Nick said, we hold 80% of the world's biodiversity. And so the ways in which that we protect our rights, our ways of life, and our communities are directly correlated to the climate crisis. So we think about the mental health within our communities. We think about the oppression and internalized poverty, this way of being that has suppressed us for too long. And we think about how we have ended up at this very position right now where we are at the edge of a cliff. We are at the edge of the cliff in regards to our timeline to save this planet. And the indigenous peoples will be the ones to lead the movement off of the edge. And so tomorrow the action will be at Memorial Park at 11:30 is where we will meet. And we will be marching to the mayor's office to demand more education around this in our schools, and to demand that he recognize this really as a crisis and stop promoting the fossil fuel and extractive industries that are destroying our communities.
I have a question. When we talked about those forces. Those forces also tell us what law and order is. Those are the forces that say it's okay for a big oil company to poison an entire river, the entire Kalamazoo, and get away with it. Not so much as a fine, let alone doing time like they're trying to do to us. So in that context, we have to continue to educate about that political imprisonment. When you met Tokata and Tokata met you in Washington, D.C., it was because Greta was receiving an Ambassador of Conscience Award from Amnesty International, which is amazing. I think that's the award that Colin Kaepernick one, or receive. But I would like to know, how do we bridge the gap between indigenous peoples and Europeans? And do you have a message for any of the political prisoners, including the women that are facing 110 years in prison because of their peaceful resistance of the Dakota Access Pipeline?
I think the biggest bridge that we can create among all people, and not just indigenous people and activists, but this underlying community that exists, this global community, I think is the personal action and choice to look at the world and look at the earth as your relative. It is a mindset. Because when people feel like they are personally threatened, when people have been personally affected by a cause, is when they truly start to care about it. And we are denying ourselves our responsibility and our obligation and spirituality when we are not looking at the earth and the people around us as our relatives. Because who are we if we are not related to the earth? We would not be here if it wasn't for the services that Mother Nature has already provided all of us. How can we continue to call ourselves activists? How can we continue to call ourselves humans if we don't recognize the relationship that already exists there? And so as humans on this planet, I think the most important thing that we can do is look at what is happening to that relationship, what is happening to our relative, what is happening to Mother Earth, and be the ones who decide to take actions, to stick up for ourselves. Because it is our children, it is us right now who are being affected. There are indigenous peoples across the entire globe being affected by this. When we talk about immigration, when we talk about what is happening to low-income communities in regards to the effects of climate change, we're talking about the climate crisis. And it is our responsibility to stick up for those who don't have a voice. If you don't see media coverage about the indigenous activists being assassinated for the work that we sit here and do right now, it is your responsibility to share that and look into it. And I think that is the biggest thing that we can do to bridge that divide.
Yeah, I mean, you said it all, that it's important that we change our mindsets, as you said, that we need to realize that everything is related, and we are related to each other, and we should not see each other as groups of us and them, but as a whole us, because we are depending on each other in so many different ways. We are depending on nature, and we are also connected to nature, and we need to see the planet and nature as something which has a value of its own, that we cannot own and exploit, and I mean, as we want. And it's just so important how we perceive the world and to, yeah.
I think that one thing that just like about these potential political prisoners is the fact that we elected these people, right? When we show up at the polls, it shows. And so when we're talking about the climate crisis, we're also talking about our responsibility to vote. Because we as people have the power to educate those around us in order to take back the leadership that already exists. I was not speaking into my at all. But yeah, we need to be able to vote, and we need to educate the people around us. Because right now we are at a space and time where voting might seem very minuscule as compared to striking every Friday. But it is what moves nations. It is what bridges divides, it is what creates change, because right now, those in leadership are not doing what we need them to. And so we need to show up. And that is one way that we can. And, you know, with the riot boosting laws, really taking a second to regard that they are taking away our constitutional rights to protest and to free speech. When someone doesn't feel safe enough to share their opinion in a public space, what has this nation become? Because ideally, right, the values that are written into the Constitution should be good. Obviously, we know that they have not been implemented the way that they should have been. An example is genocide. But we signed treaties with this nation, our tribe, and right now we have a responsibility to this land, if not these borders, to be able to protect it and the people within it. No matter if we see them as our enemy, because we're not fighting for them. We're fighting for their children. We're fighting for their children's children. We are fighting for the next generations. And even if they can't see it, their children will thank us.
And we are lucky enough to live in democracies. And in democracies, the people have the power. And we just have to reclaim that power. Because right now, it may not seem like it, but we are actually the ones who are the ones who have the power. And if we use that power in a good way, then we can accomplish anything. So we just need to fight, and we need to show them what really matters to us, and that this is a matter of life and death for many people, and to mobilize and organize, it is so extremely important in times like these. So there's so incredibly much one individual can do, and if it's one thing, then mobilize and organize yourself and try to push try everything you can to push in the right direction. We need everyone to push from every possible angle into the right direction, because if we start doing that, then we have won.
Yep.
So, you know, I hate to be the one to push us towards a conclusion, but I don't even know what time it is. Time doesn't exist to me anymore. I'm sitting here, not having my phones, not having nothing. 7:20. Okay, we're all right. We're doing all right. But we do want to open it up to just maybe 3 or 4 questions. Keep them quick. I will give you the mic if you want to ask a question about the world's eyes are on you guys. And whatever you say and whatever you want to do, whatever moves you want to make, we're going to support you 100%. And this way we can change the entire narrative, change the entire trajectory that we're on as a country and as a human family. I thank you guys, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. I know you're young, but you're shouldering a lot, and you're carrying a lot of that burden and that weight and collective responsibility you're shouldering, you're carrying. And we just want you to know that we've got your back and we love you for that. That's right.
Thank you for being here. We live in a place where we're surrounded by people who deny the science, and it's exhausting. and you're one of our inspirations. How is it that you wake up every morning and keep going on? What do you draw upon? Because I am getting tired of all the denial and lack of action. What do you do?
I'll go first. For me, I think there's privilege in thinking that we have that choice, right? Because we live in communities who are affected by this every day, and as an Indigenous person, I can say that there is a very real threat of life or death within our communities when talking about this crisis, because we are on the front lines of it. We are holding right now the last string that is tying us to the world that we used to know and the world that's in crisis. And so for me, it's never really been a choice ever since I was young. Just recognizing the magnitude of what's at stake. Because when we're talking about the land and the waters, when we're talking about our future, these are three things that define who we are as humans, and really it's all we have. None of us have anything to lose if we don't have those things, which is why it is wild that not all of us are waking up every day fighting. Because really, what is left of us when we don't have our material possessions? What are we actually made of? I think really that is what keeps me going. And the idea that in this world, as much negativity and as much hate as there is that and more potential for good and positivity.
That's right. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, as it's, you don't really have a choice if you understand the urgency. I mean, of course you have a choice. You have a choice to look away, but I mean, we just cannot do that. And I cannot do that because then I would then be able to look myself in the eyes. And also, I mean, as you said, so many people don't have a choice. And it's both very strengthening to see, but also very sad to see that it's often the communities at the front line who are the ones fighting the most, because they don't have a choice, and yet they are not the ones who are responsible. It should not be those who have to fight the most. And yeah.
It's such a profound combination of worldviews that is expressed, and it's making us just all think anew. And thank you for giving us your energy.
Hi. What are you guys' thoughts on capitalism and how it affects the
planet? I think that there is no sustainable solution if we do not criticize capitalism. About how much money you have or how well-statused you are within these political borders. We are all on the same level when it comes to crisis. And especially, right, we see that the climate crisis is intersectional in that way, because as an Indigenous person, we can lower carbon emissions all we want, but if we're not protecting Indigenous people, what becomes of that last percentage of biodiversity? If we're not protecting a way of life and changing our mindset, then what becomes of the biodiversity? If we are not protecting the essential things and only dealing with carbon emissions. We're not talking about a solution then, we are talking about an aversion of an inevitable defeat. And I think that really the exploitation and the greed that comes along with capitalism is what we need to tackle. And it's a personal decision to look that in the eye. When we are talking about what matters to us, it shouldn't be a question. The answer should always be my children, the environment around me, and the future. And capitalism doesn't save room for any of that. It only saves room for economic growth.
Mm-hmm.
And what is economic growth if you don't have water?
Mm-hmm.
It does make sense.
Thank you for that. We've been trying to graduate from labels for a long time, the isms and the ologies.
First of all, I just want to say thank you guys. Both of you two are amazing young women, and both of you guys, it's really empowering being here. I am an educator, and I've been an educator for probably the last 7 years, so I want to ask both of you guys, what is your advice for us as school leaders, as teachers, as classmates? Both of you guys have such a powerful voice, but if you could give us, something that what we need and something that we can put into action Monday. Because we want to, I know as an educator, this is exactly what I hope my students get from my class for being around me, but also what you guys have to offer to us. So any piece of advice or anything you want to share, what would you want to see? I know you guys talked a lot about wanting more stuff for the education and the curriculum, so what does that look like and what do you guys hope for? Thank you.
I first heard about the climate and ecological crisis in school, and of course it wasn't the entire situation. It was only like a tiny bit of the problem. But I think, and I had to find out more myself because the school, it wasn't a part of the curriculum to learn about the big picture. And so I think that if we start teaching young people about the urgency, and I think young people are going to get angry because I became curious when I realized what was actually happening and what was at stake. And I, of course, I'm not going to go into details about exactly what it is, but just the broader picture, and to also to encourage young people to take a stand, and to tell them that they can have such a big impact on the world, and because young people are the future, and if we tell young people that they can be a part of that future and they can help shaping that future, I think that will have enormous impact.
I think that, as Greta said, right, informing people about the impact that they can have is going to be really essential. And also, I think in a lot of communities, right, especially right here in Pine Ridge, I think that when people are talking about the impact that we can have as individuals and together, I think we need to also be talking about the resources that there are already available for students to access. Because if you tell a kid to take action, sure, maybe they will go stand outside, but what does it look like if they're confronted by police? What does it look like if they're at the max of the attendance policy for being gone? I think finding these specific pathways for students to take and being there when they have questions. I also think that in the school system as it is right now is very flawed. In a lot of ways it doesn't give room for criticism. And the ways in which educators can open that is being the ones who say, this is the part where you should maybe ask. Do some research into this part. Because if students aren't adequately paying attention in your classes, they're not going to take the action and initiative to ask the questions that need to be asked. So where is your moral responsibility to say, hey, this is maybe where you should do a little extra research? Because I'd imagine if we all had taken the extensive research that I and that Greta had taken about the climate crisis, we'd have a lot more climate activists. So yeah, I think that really is our responsibility. Teachers are some of the most important people in the entire world.
That's right.
They are the people who are helping raise this new generation of world leaders. And so every single student sitting in your classroom has the potential to change the entirety of this world. And giving them the access to resources and giving them the respect of telling them what is the actual situation that we're in is your responsibility.
And also lots of students, lots of people of all ages, they hear about these things and they get concerned about it, like, oh, maybe this is something I should do something about, and then they're just left there without anything concrete to do. And I think we need to give people examples of what they can do to not lose that engagement. Because then, I mean, a lot of people can just either shut it out and say like, yeah, but there's nothing I can do about it, or they fall into depression or get climate anxiety because it's just too big of a problem. So to tell people things they can do is also very important, to not lose the engagement and commitment.
So we're going to give you, and I want to apologize to Bold, Nebraska, because they wanted to ask a question, but we love Bold, Nebraska. We always got your back. But we got to close it down here. I also want to thank the Red Club volunteers because they cooked all the chili. They cooked a bunch of food. All the people that do the work. You know what I mean? We're only as good as our workers. But I want to give you each an opportunity to close out. You know, say your last words, and then we want you to sit and wait for a quick 10-minute a giveaway and a recognition. We're Lakota people, so we have to give you things. I don't know if you can fit it all. The first Tesla to ever set foot in Lakota country is driven by Greta and her father. I don't know if you can fit all her gifts. I don't know if you can fit her gifts, but we wanted President Bear Runner, Red Dawn, and another have brought some gifts to give you, so we want to make room for that. But we want to give you a chance to just say some final words, and then we'll start that portion.
I think the only words that I have left to say are that you all are just as powerful as any of the people that you look up to as heroes. So the Mandelas of the world, the Gandhis, the Gretas, the Tokatas, the Red Clouds, the Crazy Horses, every single one of us has the potential to make just as much change and impact on the world as they had. And it is only us in denial of that potential that is holding us back. When people realize how much power they have, when people realize how much potential they have, it scares the people who are already in position because they know what they're doing is wrong. And so us, as this population, we need to take ownership of that. Take ownership of ourselves again, finally, and stand up and say, I know that this is wrong and I'm going to do something about it. Because right now, it is not a question anymore is if climate change is real. It is inherently, it should be known that this is a crisis that we are facing in our everyday lives. And it is us, it's going to be this generation who changes it.
Well, there's not much I can add to that. Just know your worth and how much you can accomplish. And also, it is so incredibly important that we listen to indigenous peoples, because they have been living in balance with nature for so long. And as you said, if we are looking for solutions, we need to, in those solutions, include indigenous people and listen to them, and the knowledge they have, you have. It's just something we have to do, and we must never lose hope, because, as you said, it is hard to constantly waking up and feel like nothing is happening, and people are just trying to delay action or make it even worse. But we must simply never allow ourselves to into despair, and never think that this is not meaningful, or it doesn't have an impact, or I can't make a change, because that is so wrong. And I think we young people, we climate activists, and we who are fighting for environmental and climate justice, I think we have proven that to be wrong, that everyone can actually have an impact, everyone can make a difference, and just never lose that set of mind, and carry on no matter how hard it will be, because it will get hard sometimes. Just have to go through it and know that you have so many people that are beside you and stand behind you in this fight. You're not alone.
We'll be there. If you want to stay there, we would like to invite President Bear Runner and Secretary Spotted Bear. Also, we'll start with the President. We just want to make sure that we can get some gifts to you. It's very important that we do that.
Okay, we'll be talking about your teacher afterwards. Each and every one of you for coming out and showing your support to our future generations. Like I said, the future leadership. And this, I guess, is kind of one of the reasons why I feel like the Creator put me in the position that I'm in, because we all share the same vision. And this is the reasons why I knock on those doors in Washington. This is why I choose to stand on the front line. Because as an older generation to our younger generations, I have to take the first hit. But I know that there's generations behind me that are going to carry on my visions and my feelings. I know that that no matter what happens to me, that we will live because of young people like this that choose to sacrifice their time of being children to stand up for what's right in the face of corporate greed and genocide and big extraction. So, you know, I want to thank, again, Greta, and I also want to highlight that, you know, Tokatawin here was also very influential in my campaign. You know, she helped with the media, the photography, and told me how to stand and to fix my collar and you know, things like that. So, you know, she and I want to thank you again, you know, because I don't think that position, you know, thank you, you know, for helping, you know, working with me to, you know, put me in a position of where I am today. And, you know, and also for myself to be, you know, I try to be a good leader in a role model to other leadership, to help them to show how to not only be connected with your values, your traditions, and your way of life, but also with your people. Because if you look around the world, you know, there's some leaders, you know, and not to point fingers at Mr. Trump, but you know, to be a good leader, you have to have a good relationship with your people. You have to listen to your people. You know, because like I said, you know, people are the ones that put you in that position. You know, so I try to be, you know, a good person and a good relative and a good human being. You know, and I want to again acknowledge our leadership that we have here today. You know, the Creator also didn't just put me in my position. But now, you know, we have Red Dawn on Capitol Hill and here. You know, we have her to be our voice, Ms. Bree Clear to be our voice on another level. So to collaborate with our membership in leadership positions to help to make a great impact for the Ocheti Shakoni. You know, because it's not just about the Oglala people. It's about humanity and the original bands that, you know, took care of the 1851 and the 1868 treaty territories. So, you know, I also would like to acknowledge Councilwoman for the Pine Ridge Village, Ms. Nakina Mills, and the Secretary of the Oglala Sioux Tribe, Ms. Jennifer Spotted, to help to present some gifts to Greta and to Tokatawin, but also we have two people that have also been on the fight on the front line. You know, some leaders that we acknowledge from our Two-Spirit community that have just fought to bring, you know, a hate crime law, you know, to the floor of the You know, so like it seems like in every direction that you look at, we're fighting for something. We're fighting for a right to live. We're fighting for a right to be who we are as the Lakota people. We're fighting for a right to be, you know, who we were intended to be. You know, it's a constant fight. It's a constant fight on every level of government. You know, and it's my honor to stand with Greta and with Tokatawin, with Felipa and with Muffy, you know, and with our current elected officials, to be on the front line together, you know, to help to make life better for everyone. So at this time, Kola, Robert Waters, will you come up, please? And I'm going to ask, this is my Kola, you know, that I've been through a lot with, Mr. Robert Waters, and I'm going to ask him if he'd render an honor song for these two young women, you know, for taking time to come to bring us together to continue our way of life. And so as we present these gifts,